Good afternoon all, my name's Ken O'Brien and today I'm here to give you a presentation that provides a brief overview of the progress that I've been doing for assessment number 2 in SWN 003. This assignment is to propose policies and processes that begin to account for the findings of Department of Veteran Affairs study into the health and well-being of the Vietnam veterans' families. This health and wellbeing study is also called the intergenerational study because it focuses on the health and wellbeing of children and families of the Vietnam veterans. Now, of significance here, the findings are not going to only deal with Vietnam veterans' families and their subsequent generations. It's also going to have significant impact on all military families and children in those families for generations to come. This is a landmark study. Now, I'm giving an overview of the study itself so that it provides a contextual landscape for the policies that I'm going to present and argue for. The study found that there were several illnesses, issues that were common amongst all 25,000 children of Vietnam veterans that participated in this study. They go from unexplainable, unusual illnesses that the medical system just simply cannot explain, down to being unemployed, alcoholic or self-medicating, and all these other issues can lead to a very high rate of attempted or committed suicide. In an earlier study it was found, a mortality study, it was found that sons of Vietnam veterans were 87% more likely than the general population to attempt suicide and or have committed it. Of course, we can't ask those people because they're not here anymore. So, the range of common illnesses go from psychological here, academic here, and physical here. Now, it's interesting, in a parallel study conducted by the Children of Vietnam Veterans Health Alliance in the States, over 630 clinical, official, unusual medical and clinical disabilities and issues are recorded. Over 630 that are attributable to service in the Vietnam War. And these effects are multi-generational because they have a genetic component. Right, so again, the way I'm going to approach this particular policy argument is about the cost it's going to have on our economy, our society and our future. And we can manage this, we can address this growing epidemic of cost and this growing epidemic of trauma and other physical health issues very, very simply. So the research component that I'm putting into this particular paper has demanded personal involvement from me. I have since 2004 been involved in this national study on the health and wellbeing of Vietnam veterans' families because I'm the son of a Vietnam veteran and I have children, one of them who has a specific neurological conditions that's attributable to service in Vietnam. And my father, of course, is a Vietnam veteran. That gave me privileged access to a lot of documents, such as the volumes, all 4 volumes, I've only got 2 here, these are the thinnest, the largest ones, back home in my library, that outline and detail the actual study and the findings themselves and how it was conducted. So I had to do a document analysis as part of my research component of all 5 of those volumes. Now, sorry, 4, because volume 4 has 5 parts to it. It's massive. So this took me some time to draw out the relevant and valid information. I thoroughly examined them and only took out the useful information. But also, I looked at those parallel studies like the one I mentioned before about 630 physical detriments, because they all have genetic impacts of military service, and I wanted to look at other stuff done around the world that we can draw a contrasting comparison on. Right. So the policy argument, the angle that I'm coming at it from is a systems approach and a fiscal argument. The system approach, because if you neglect the intergenerational impacts of war and military service, it impacts detrimentally on defence, well that's obvious, but aged care as people get older, and they get older quicker when they're under the extreme stress that war can give and the illnesses that they also pass on. And the mental and general health system, corrections, education and employment These are all fundamental management systems within our society that if we leave untapped and unmanaged and uneducated, it's going to spiral out of control. All we need to do is a couple of very, very fundamental things. I'll get onto that in just a minute. For example, and some of the things we haven't been able to do this for ages because the Department of Defence and Veteran Affairs has been very selective about the information it releases, almost paranoid. So, for example, in 2013, the very first ever data release by Department of Defence shows that they have increased their spending from 24 million to 15 million to 24 million in just a few years on mental health. And when you break that down to the number of people in the ADF, as of 2013, July 2013, that was an equivalent of $433 per permanent member per year that was being spent on their mental health. Well, of course, not every ADF person needs it, but averaged out, that's what it was. Okay, and here it is in a visual format. DVA manages the national programs for military and ex-military people, and that's 6.1% up there. These Department of Social Security, the health ones in hospitals, this is your PBS, which is your pharmaceutical benefit scheme, and your medical benefit scheme. So when you go to the doctor or a specialist, these are all subsidised through Medicare. Right. So I'll argue for wider implications and higher costs of the continued neglect as the findings impact all military families and in fact all families involved in these services, these systems here. And I'll argue that the cost of doing nothing is far greater than the investment in understanding, management and optimisation from this situation, and that's done simply by educating and understanding. So, therefore, the first recommendation that I'm proposing is here that we have specialised and specific education and training for medical and mental health professionals so that we can get that ball rolling. I mean, the expert is the person that has the lived experience. Usually it's the patient, because they've grown up with this and they know what their limitations, they know their symptoms, and they understand what works and what doesn't. So, a range of education and training suites for the practitioners that is informed and directed by their patients with this lived experience is going to be more accurate and relevant to the outcomes needed. And again, they will affect all those social systems that I talked about. There will be a snowball effect. I argue another recommendation needs to be the re-establishment of perpetual financial supports, operational and fiscal support for a managed peer managed support service run by those who live with this system so that they can collectively inform policy, collectively inform practice, and also provide true healing and understanding from other people who have lived these stories. Finally, my third recommendation will be a dedicated employer support service and system so that children of Vietnam veterans, in fact children in military families, are better understood for what their capabilities, their true potentials really are. If you give a person a good job in which they seem to be suited to, they're going to be happier at work, they're going to save the bottom line, they're going to be more profitable, and they're going to be more productive. And it'll give them meaning and understanding. And that, again, has snowball effects on all those systems. So, the submission structure, the way it's going to work, that I'm going to present this in, that I'm planning to, is as listed there. This was a list provided by the lecturer, by Mike in a previous email, and it's just executive summary, introduction, lit review, methods, the findings of the study where I present them and argue a little bit about them with some other information thrown in, comparative information, the recommendations that I'm going to make, a bit of a conclusion to wrap the whole thing up with appendices and reference, of course. Okay. Now the references themselves, I've got over 2,500 references that I've been compiling since 2005, when I started doing some undergraduate study and postgraduate study into this issue as well. I've been following this for several years, for nearly 3 decades. So I've got an EndNote library that I use for my referencing system, and of course some of the retrieval dates or accessed dates when I got this information is going to be pretty old. It won't be this year, that's for sure. As I say, I've been collating this for many years. So anyway, I really believe that if we don't bring about a change now,